Not a ton of elite pitching options for tonight in daily fantasy baseball. I think there is probably one guy we can feel pretty good about as a consensus, but beyond that, it's pretty wishy-washy as far as who you want to rank second for tonight on FanDuel. And I think that's a fun slate. It does allow you some creativity in where you want to go. It allows you to kind of follow your instincts, follow your gut, but definitely does not make things easy on us for today. We're going to dive in, let you know who that top guy is, let you know the contenders for the crown at number 2 for tonight, and also talk about some stacks that could be good over on FanDuel.com. Welcome on in to the solo shot. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sanas. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire, here to break down Wednesday's 7-game main slate with lock set for 6:40 p.m. Eastern for today. Again, lock is at 6:40 p.m. Eastern for tonight, so get those lineups in early before the early lock time for tonight. The only weather note for this slate is that there is just one game with the temperature below 70 degrees. That is in Seattle for the Yankees and the Mariners. Just 60 degrees there. So I would downgrade batters in that game as a result of the weather there, and that may play a decent role in how we view the pitchers for tonight to mute a couple of fine offenses in Seattle. We'll dive in to the pitching preview and more in just 1 second. But first, a reminder to make sure you're subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. Our PGA DFS podcast for the Memorial Tournament went up yesterday. That's with myself and Brandon Gadula breaking down our top plays for PGA DFS for this week at Weirfield Village. Get that by subscribing and checking us out wherever you get your podcasts just by searching for the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. And if you like what you hear, leave us a 5-star rating as well. Make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs because right now, new customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. There's no better place to bet all the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. First online real money wager only. $10 deposit required. Refund issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 14 days. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino, LLC. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit FanDuel.com/RG in Arizona. 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342. In Connecticut, 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat. In Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. In Wyoming and Kansas, 1-800-522-4700. Or in Kansas, ksgamblinghelp.com. Louisiana is 1-877-770-STOP. In Massachusetts, gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support. In Maryland, mdgamblinghelp.org. In New York, 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. And in West Virginia, go to 1-800-GAMBLER.net. Pitching preview for this Wednesday main slate. Hunter Brown comes in with the highest salary on FanDuel. His salary here is $10,500, followed by Aaron Nola at $99. James Paxton is for start off the IL, $95. George Kirby coming in $92. Blake Snell, $9,000, with Louis Varland, Braxton Garrett, Luke Weaver, and Alek Manoah as the other guys at $8,000 or higher. Now, of those guys, there are some strikeout pitchers there for sure, because Aaron Nola at his best can get strikeouts. James Paxton, when he's healthy, can get strikeouts. Blake Snell in the past has. But as far as projecting guys for tonight, based on their form, based on matchup, venue, et cetera, there's only one guy to me who is like a standout high strikeout pitcher on this slate, and that is Hunter Brown. And he's going to be my top pitcher for tonight. He's really kicked it up here recently, and he was good to start too, but recently, pretty lights out for Hunter Brown. I don't think it's fully fluky, despite having some good matchups in that span. I'm willing to buy into him here against the Twins. The Twins are a high strikeout team, 28% strikeout rate against righties. They've gotten key pieces back, but I would still expect them to be a high strikeout team regardless. And Brown has gotten a lot of those recently. Across his past 3 starts, his strikeout totals are 8, 9, and 10, and his high before then was 8. And this spike in strikeouts for Brown has coincided with some changes in his arsenal. In his first 5 starts, he threw his four-seam fastball 31% of the time. It's up to 46% in the past 5 starts. And For a four-seam fastball, this is a very good strikeout pitch. It has a 23% whiff rate, according to Baseball Savant, which is actually pretty similar to his slider as far as how many whiffs it generates. The curveball is still the best pitch in terms of like a generating strikeouts, and the usage on the pitches remain pretty similar. So I don't think going with more four-seamers and fewer sliders is a bad thing for Hunter Brown specifically. Now, the key caveat here is that 2 of those starts were against the A's, and that's a bad offense. But 3 were also on the road. He's now at home facing the Twins. I have Brown projected for 7.5 strikeouts. That is down from what he's been doing, but it's also almost 2 strikeouts above everybody else on this slate. So I'm not sure if this spike will stick for Hunter Brown, but he got a lot of strikeouts at AAA last year. I like his individual pitches, so I think he is a good play for tonight. Of the options on tonight's slate, to me, Hunter Brown is the one guy who I feel really firm in. So single entry cash games, to me, Hunter Brown is going to be your top guy for tonight. I think the other 2 plays both should come from that Yankees-Mariners game, as weird as that may feel. And it's not just because of the weather, though the weather does definitely help. The first is George Kirby here at 92 facing the Yankees, and it's not a fun matchup. They have a 112 WRC plus against righties with a 192 ISO. That ISO is the best number on the slate. But Kirby, I think, is better able to counter that than a lot of guys. He does a fantastic job of suppressing hard contact. We've seen Kirby throwing more curveballs his past 7 starts, and in that time, he's let up just a 33% hard hit rate, and he still got into trouble because he let up 7 earned runs against the Pirates at home last week, but, you know, he has a path to being dominant via all that hard contact suppression. He went 7 shutout innings against the Rangers. He went 7 innings against the Braves on the road, and those are very good offenses, and both came since the switch to throwing more curveballs. I don't really want to go here. To be honest, it's kind of by default with a lot of elimination of other guys, but I do think that it is the right move for this specific slate. Kirby's not really a high strikeout guy, but I still have him projected for the 3rd most strikeouts for tonight because he goes deep in games and doesn't mess around with his pitches. A lot of the guys aren't going to check those boxes. So I'm fine with Kirby at 92, not enthusiastic here, which is why I feel really good about Brown as like a guy I go to in both cash games and tournaments. But Kirby to me would be the number 2 option at 92. We'll talk about Aaron Nola in things to watch as well. Other side of that game is Clark Schmidt at $7,700. I was on him last week and he was fine. Just let up 1 earned run, but also had just 4 strikeouts. So that start is not why I'm back on Schmidt for tonight. I'm here because not many guys on this slate can get strikeouts, frankly. They're limited either by their stuff or by their pitch count. Like if you look at the guys with talent on this slate beyond Nola and beyond Kirby and beyond Brown, I would say Braxton Garrett's probably next up, the most talented value play, but the Marlins don't let him go super deep into games. James Paxton's not a value, but even as far as a guy at 95, we saw him really struggle last week against the Angels. So sort of by process of elimination, we wind up on Schmidt here at 77. It does help that he's getting strikeouts, though. Across the full year, Schmidt has a 25% strikeout rate, and that carries more juice now that the Yankees are letting him go deeper in games. So a 25% strikeout rate means more on 92 projected pitches than it does at 85. The Mariners offense is a very good offense. I like them a lot, but they will definitely strike out. 25% strikeout rate against righties so far this year. Schmidt has a lot of issues with hard contact, which means he could get rocked here. And it shouldn't be a surprise if that does happen, but he has upside for $7,700 in the slate where there's not a lot of depth beyond Brown. So I think that's good enough to justify him at this salary. You could save the salary, go down, try to get upside via batter. I think that's actually an okay approach for tonight. So even though I'm not enthusiastic about Kirby or Schmidt, I think their salaries help. I think that the ambiguity in the slate helps. So to me, they're going to slot in behind Hunter Brown. And again, we'll talk more about Aaron Nola later on and dissect what to do with him. Before that, though, let's talk about some stacks for tonight's slate. Julio Teheran's first start for the Brewers went pretty well for him. He lasted 5 innings and allowed just 1 earned run and got a good number of strikeouts too, but just a 1-start sample here. So I'm going to be back on him stacking against him tonight with the Toronto Blue Jays. In that game for Tehran, his swinging strike rate was 8.4%, which means the strikeouts were largely dependent on strikes looking, which can happen. There are a lot of guys who are deceptive, who can get a lot of movement, get a lot of strikes looking, but that's not the most typical path to getting a lot of strikeouts. Tehran also let up a 57% fly ball rate in that game. Did a decent job of suppressing hard contact, but again, it was in a small sample. So I didn't see enough in that game to be out on stacking against him. The older data, Tehran, last time he was in the majors, says we should stack against him. The minor league data from this year says we should too. So I think we should still be here. The Jays, 114 WRC plus against righties, 166 ISO. They're okay. They're not great, but I think they're good enough, and I will be high on them for tonight. Now, Brandon Belt left last night's game with a stomach bug, it sounds like, so not sure if he'll plays, but slowly interested in buying back in on him. He has just 2 home runs so far this year, which is not ideal, but I think he's getting better. His barrel rate in May is 13.5%. His hard hit rate is 43%. It has not translated to power yet because his ISO is 141, but he's hitting fourth now against righties. I think it should click eventually. And, he's striking out a lot. Still is not what he used to be by any means. So if he plays, I will be okay being on Brandon Belt, but no guarantee he does based on the stomach bug, based on that, based on performance, honestly, too. So I'll be there if I can, but I think it's better than it looks at first glance, at least with Brandon Belt. Second stack is going to be Arizona facing Dinelson Lamet coming out the IL for the Rockies. He'll be doing so as a starter, which is kind of intriguing because I liked Lamet back in the day with the Padres, but he struggled as a reliever both last year and this year. So it's hard to expect that to improve as he stretches out and moves into the rotation. Against Arizona tonight, I think that we should be stacking against him. Lamet had a small sample this year. His ERA, expected ERA, I should say, was 5.03. Last year as a reliever, his expected ERA was 4.53. Now, in his rehab starts down in AAA, while he was stretching out, he did look pretty good. Let up just 1 earned run across 10 2/3 innings. Got a lot of ground balls, got a lot of whiffs, which is what he did as a starter previously. And there is some risk he could carry that into his return to the majors. And Lamet was likely a reliever more so due to injury risk than performance, I kind of think. So this is not a lock by any means. I still hold out some hope for him, kind of, as like a fan of his in the past, but no stacks or locks. So, and the struggles that Lamet had as a reliever don't just go away. Those do still matter. So I am going to stack Arizona here, and I think that's the right move in this specific situation. Within the stack, I'm really kind of shocked by what Lourdes Gurriel is doing. I never used to be someone who was super high in Gurriel, either against righties or lefties, facing a righty for tonight. But against righties this year, he's a 315 ISO, gone on this big power binge recently. And that's a number, isolated slugging, that tends to stabilize pretty quickly. But the actual WOBA for Gurriel is 397. His expected WOBA is 356 with an 8.6% barrel rate. So he's still expected to be good, but probably not as scorching hot as he has been. So if you're looking at prioritizations within the Diamondback stack, I would say Corbin Carroll needs to be number 1 by a significant margin. I want the 2 sources of upside that you get via Carroll versus Gurriel, who's not going to run a whole lot. And the salaries are the exact same on both these guys. Carroll is at 35. So like, if you got 35 laying around, give me Corbin Carroll every time. Gurriel definitely a part of stacks, but as far as like the ranking within those stacks, Corbin Carroll for me is in a tier of his own when stacking this team. Ketel Marte also seems to be picking things up a bit too, more willing to run than Gurriel. So I might actually go Marte above Gurriel also. Finally, Carlos Carrasco, really nice start last time out, 6 2/3 innings, just 1 earned run allowed. But that came at Wrigley with the winds howling in pretty heavily. And the starts before that were less encouraging. So I'm okay stacking the Phillies against him tonight. The start before that Wrigley wind one for Carrasco was his first off the IL. He went 5 innings there and allowed 5 earned runs. Allowed 2 barrels in that game with a 38% hard hit rate. Looking at that game against the Cubs at Wrigley, didn't get a lot of whiffs in that game. His swing and strike rate was 9%. So he wasn't overwhelming by any means, despite the good results. I'm not sure how much his injury impacted things before he went on the IL, but for the full season, Carrasco has a 5.73 expected ERA. He has a 5.69 skill interactive ERA. Carrasco was solid last year, but definitely not dominant. Now, coming off an injury, a year older, I think it's okay to expect him to take a step back a bit overall. The Phillies offense slowly inching up here. That's the team he's facing for tonight, the Philadelphia Phillies. They're WRC plus against righties up to 107. They draw a lot of walks, and I think they'll be a good test for him. So the Phillies, I think, grade out pretty well for stacking, and they'll be my number 3 tonight behind the Diamondbacks and the Blue Jays. Carrasco, pretty interesting platoon splits. He has a lower ground ball rate, or allowed a lower ground ball rate against righties last year than lefties, which led to a higher WOBA against him. And it's similar in a small sample this year. I'm still going to prefer Bryce Harper and Kyle Schwarber, but it does help for guys like Nick Castellanos, JT Realmuto, Trey Turner, relative to where they would be against righties. And for Realmuto and Turner, it's been pretty rough recently, but salary's low. They do still steal bases, so I'm still on those guys for sure, despite how things have gone this year. And I think they get a better grade out against this righty than they do against a lot of righties. Let's stick with that same game and go down to things to watch. Talk about Aaron Nola. I do think you could consider him over George Kirby. I can't get there over Hunter Brown personally, because Nola's been in a funk all year. Hasn't really had a click yet, but it's been better recently. The past 2 starts, he has 17 strikeouts, but he's going on the road now to face the Mets. They are a low strikeout team. So if Nola goes like 6 innings and gets 6 strikeouts for tonight, I could see myself being pretty heavy on him next time out, because this is such a tough spot. But I'm not quite there yet. So still monitoring Nola, want to be here eventually. Do like him a lot, and he goes super deep in games, but want to see a bit more and get a better matchup before I fully commit to being back on him personally. The Red Sox are facing Luke Weaver tonight, and they have the highest implied total on the slate. Weaver's ERA this year is 5.45, so you understand why the implied total is high. It's a good park factor. Warmer in Boston than it's been most of this year too. But I do think that Weaver's better than his results. He's doing a really good job of suppressing hard contact, and I don't like stacking against guys who do that. We did see the Reds bullpen implode last night. I think they're better than that personally. So I'm going to be lower on the Red Sox than most people are for tonight. Hoping that makes me a bit different, because I just think there are a couple paths of failure here, because Weaver does get a lot of weak contact. The bullpen not as bad as it looked last night. So I'll be okay being a bit lower on the Red Sox than most for tonight. Finally, the Rockies are facing Tommy Henry in that Lamet game in Phoenix. Not a lot of guys you want to use in the Rockies, but I think one-offs are viable here because Henry's peripherals are rough. Maybe you can get to like a 3-player stack via guys like Randall Grichuk, Chris Bryant, potentially, Brenton Doyle. I think you could get to 3 or 4 righties on this team, but their overall numbers against lefties so rough with a 66 WRC plus that I don't want to go too crazy. So Rockies a consideration primarily though for one-offs more so than for a full stack. Let's finish up here the dinger calls for today. The boring one, Kyle Schwarber. I used Bryce Harper last week. I feel bad using him 2 weeks in a row. So we'll go to Schwarber instead. 13 home runs so far this year. Facing Carrasco, I think it's a good spot for Schwarber. Schwarber is our first dinger call for today. The fun one, let's go back to the Rockies. They're in Arizona. Very warm. Roof will be open for tonight. So Brenton Doyle has shown a good bit of power both in the minors and the majors. Can swipe a bag, so if he doesn't hit the home run part of this, maybe we can still get there for DFS via a stolen base or something like that. So let's go Brenton Doyle. Salary $2,800 on FanDuel. I don't think that's too bad. So our dinger calls for today: Kyle Schwarber and Brenton Doyle. That's all we got here for today on the Solo Shot, though. Again, make sure to check out our PGA DFS podcast breaking down the Memorial Tournament. Get that by subscribing wherever you get your podcast. If you like what you hear, leave us a 5-star rating. Also, don't forget the Solo Shot goes up daily over on the FanDuel YouTube page. Leave us a thumbs up there if you are watching there. We appreciate all of you as always. And don't forget to subscribe to the FanDuel YouTube page for all the other great content over there. If you've got any questions for me, I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Want to thank you all for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with your MLB DFS lineups for tonight. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow to break down Thursday's slate. This has been the Solo Shot right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.